Welcome to the tour of Spain. Well, mini wine tour in Spain anyways. I am going to lead you through 5 beautiful Spanish wines to introduce you to the style of Spanish winemakers have made famous, not just here in North America, but of course overseas in Europe, and showing you how great the wines can be for the value that you get, meaning compared to other wineries and other wines throughout the world that we're used to seeing in our LCBOs or in restaurant menus. Some of the greatest wines are coming from areas like Spain, Portugal. Yes, Italy was already known there. France was already known there. Greece. There's some other countries that have also been producing wines for centuries, and they're just starting to get the recognition that I think that they deserve. So we're going to do 2 different whites, a rosé or rosado, as they say in Spain, and then 2 reds. So hopefully that you've taken the time to chill both the whites and the rosé, and your reds have been open and breathing just for a little bit, maybe close to an hour would be lovely. You have your glass or glasses in front of you, and if so, let's get started. So before we get started, make sure to have some water handy nearby, and your wines are chilled nearby. If you didn't get a chance to read the notes before, you'll notice that there are going to be strategic little pauses in between each wine. This allows you to take breaks as necessary in case you have to leave. You don't feel like you need to always hit pause. You'll have basically 10 seconds if you have to go and grab something. But if you just want to play it through, you can do that as well. It just allows people to who want to break it up over a period of time, they can do that. You'll notice if you've never done one of our wine classes before, if you haven't had the opportunity to visit us here at Wander in person, you may be unfamiliar with this little pretty contraption. There are 2 different styles of it actually. This is my older one, black and silver, and then the newer ones are done in a, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a sleeker, more modern looking, looks like a little spaceship. But all it does, it's called a Coravin, is the name of the manufacturer. This is a wine preserving system. This allows me to pull wine out of the bottle without removing the cork, which means that I can pour a little bit in my glass now so that I can share with you on this class, but then the wine doesn't have a chance to age, breathe, or change at all before I make them into the little tasting kits that you have before you. So it's handy and we use it a lot here. You don't need to learn all the technical things, but if you're curious, it's argon gas that actually reseals the cork. But anyways, enough for the nerdy stuff. I'm going to pour myself a little splash. So first one we're doing is the Albarino from the northern part of Spain. And now I'm not pouring myself very much, just enough so that you can see color. So Albarino is grown not just in Spain, but also in Portugal. So if you're looking at that map of Spain that I included for you, you'll notice that the area in question is up in the Galicia. So Galicia is in the top northern part of Spain. The most northern western part of Spain is actually the most famous areas for this. And there's a little region there called Rías Baixas. It is renowned for the Albarino grape with the cool breeze coming from the ocean from both north and west. It's considered temperate, meaning that it's got, it's hot in the summer and cool in the winter. So it has a combination of different things happening where it can get kind of warm in the summer, but the cool breeze from the ocean actually cools things off so the grapes don't get too hot. And for something like an Albarino grape, which requires a great deal of acidity, and then the winemaker's touch to make it a little softer, it is a very fresh wine. So to do a proper tasting so that you can see for yourself whether it's fresh or not, we're actually going to go through the full tasting process. We're going to do this for each of the 5 wines. I'll start it off going a little bit slow and detailed, and then by the time you finish all 5, you're going to be a pro. We do this in all of our classes here, and that's just to teach you how to use all of your senses to fully enjoy the wine in its entirety. And you'll see what I mean, as opposed to just taking a sip like you normally would at a restaurant or at your dining room table. So grab something white. whether it's a piece of paper, whether it's a napkin, whether it's paper towel, something. Because depending on the lighting and the colors in the room that you're having right now, you're not necessarily going to get the truest color of what the wine actually is. So by having something white nearby, it actually blocks out all of that other ambient color and allows you to see the wine in its truest color. So I'm showing it to you here. So it's a light straw color. Because I don't have a lot of my glass, but you can see it's like this paler yellow color. And if you had very yellowish tint in your room, this may actually even look even lighter in color. If it was very white in your room, this would look even darker. But that's what I mean by having something white nearby. It actually does tend to block things out. So now that you looked at the color, which allows you to get an idea of, okay, this is going to be a light tasting wine or strong tasting wine. You're also looking for clarity. How clear is it? Can I see right through it? Is there any fogginess or sediment in it? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means different textures, mouthfeel, different finish that the winemaker wants. And then the other thing is you can also take a look at how it's clinging to the glass, which are the legs. Easier to see with red wine, obviously. The legs is how the wine drips down the side of the glass, and that gives you an indication of how much alcohol is in it. So now the next part we're going to use our nose, which is another part of enjoying wine, and you're going to take 2 sniffs. The first one, I just want you to put your nose in the glass. Hopefully you didn't put too much in right away. And right away you get this like freshness. It's like citrus and fruitiness and touch of floral, all the things all mixed up together. So now, carefully, whether you can do this in the air or you can do it on a tabletop in front of you, just give the glass a swirl, which allows oxygen and allows all those aromas to kind of dance around the inside of the glass. Now I'm going to put your nose back in. Now, do you smell any different? If anything, you are just going to get more intense aromas of what you smelled that first time. So this second time is just to either intensify those first aromas that you identified when you first put your nose in, or it's going to bring out new things that you didn't notice that first time. All depends on your sniffer. Okay, so now you're thinking, okay, can we sip now? Yes, you may. Just a sip. Now allow that to sort of coat the inside of your mouth. So this is like trial run 1. So all this is going to do is basically cleanse your palate. So if you had a sip of something else prior to this class, if you just brushed your teeth, which is possible, whether you just had a little snack or anything else, that is what is allowing all of this, the juiciness of it to sort of cleanse everything away and then start from scratch. Now your second sip is going to be the closest thing to what the winemaker intended, because you have nothing else to interfere in. But one of the things, it's almost like sucking on a lemon sometimes. I love the acidity and freshness of Albarino. It is, it's very clean, it's very crisp. Because it has that ocean air, some Albarinos, this one's very delicate. Some of them can actually taste salty, like from the salt air, and that gets into the soil that's nearby the coast. This one I just find is like, just again, it's very fresh, but it's very balanced. It's not too citrusy, it's not too salty, it's not too floral, it's a little bit of everything. You get some green notes in there as well, almost like that fresh green grass, herbs kind of thing. It's a very clean tasting wine. This is ideal, obviously, for seafood because you're near the ocean, right? You say you kind of, what goes together, or what grows together goes together is the saying we kind of hear quite a bit in wine land. But it is it basically means that if wherever you are, if there are foods that are growing there and wines being produced there, usually the wine and the food will naturally go together. So anytime I tell somebody that if you're near the coast at all, and if there's seafood at all, whether it's fish or shellfish or anything, look for a wine that's produced there, and it will naturally be a perfect pairing with that. So yes, there's a lot of seafood on the coast of Spain in this area. When I was traveling there, even just down below the balcony area of the dining room of the hotel we were staying at on the coast, there's mussels attached to all the little cliffs down below, right to the water's edge. Mussels and all kinds of, there's seafood platters. It's so plentiful and it's so fresh. that it doesn't really need anything, kind of sauces or anything else. So it's just absolutely pleasant to sort of nibble at all that stuff at any time during the day, knowing that someone just picked it or went and caught it 10 minutes before. And that with a bottle of Albarino, nice, simple chilled and the sun on you. It is, there's no other place in Spain like it. There's a lot of great coastal areas around Spain, but from my opinion anyways, having an Albarino in the Rías Baixas is probably one of the simple pleasures in life, and I can't wait to go and do it again soon. So now you know this is your go-to for seafood, especially if you like these light and crisp wines. You're welcome. So this next wine is going to be a little unusual for all my Spanish wine lovers out there, because it is not a grape that's usually made into a single varietal wine very often. So I wanted to give you a bit of an indication of there's more to Spanish wines than just Albarino or Garnacha Blanca. So this is from Remat. It is their 2018 Chardonnay. So you're thinking, Chardonnay you say? Now don't panic, because some people are big anything but Chardonnay. We call those people ABC, anything but Chardonnay. It is from the Coster de Segre, which is a little, almost like a sub-region of Catalonia by Barcelona. So we're looking at the northeast coast of Spain. So you should see that on your little map that I gave you. So in the Costa de Segre area, because they are close to France, besides planting the standard Spanish varietals that you may be familiar with if you know Spanish wines, they have also been experimenting over the last so many years, experimenting with planting classic French varietals as well, and then producing some interesting blends. So this area is also one of the areas nearby where they're making cava, which is a sparkling wine, of course, from Spain, done in the champagne method. But they also make some great white wines and white blends, and they'll do some whites and rosés, but primarily they are all about uniqueness, which I think is kind of fascinating. Remat actually has been producing wines for over 100 years. So they've been around and playing around with some things. When I first had this Chardonnay, I was kind of pleasantly surprised because I didn't know what to expect from a Spanish Chardonnay. So maybe it'll be interesting for you as well. So I got water on that page, which I guess doesn't matter. Paper. So hold up something white. Right away, you see the color is so much different. It is darker in tone, so this would be a full-on straw color. They like to use straw as a color descriptor quite often in winemaking. So you know it's going to be a little richer in flavor than the Albarino was, but now let's put a nose to it and see if we see anything different. So right away I'm getting a little bit more on the floral thing, different kind of a fruit aroma than I did with the Albarino. So let's add some oxygen to it by giving it a bit of a spin. Put your nose back in. Oh yes, definitely more intense. I would say definitely more on the floral side of things, but I am getting some fruit, kind of like maybe some white peaches, not necessarily tropical fruits, touch of citrus. Citrus is in there for sure. Okay, enough. Have a sip. So it's still clean and crisp, like the Albarino is, but the flavor is definitely different, and it's a longer finish. So when I say longer finish, I am meaning that even after swallowing it and sitting for 15-20 seconds, you're still tasting it. The more that a wine has a longer finish, in my opinion, as a bit of a, well, as in the food and wine business, the better it's going to be as a food pairing wine. Meaning that it's not going to disappear, so it's still going to balance out with the food that you're eating. Any wines that have a very short finish to them, meaning you swallow them and you don't taste them anymore, it's very difficult to pair food with them sometimes because you lose the flavor of the wine so quickly. And those wines are great patio wines, they're great quick sippers, really refreshing. But if you're looking for wines that are going to make your mouth water like this one does, with a lot of acidity and fruit flavor in it, this is a great food pairing wine. What would pair well with this? So of course seafood would still be a great one, even though of course this area is not so close to the ocean area, but it's probably still get some influence of it. But I would still things like grilled pork, this pork and chicken, and all of the other cream sauces would be really great with this. You don't see a ton in Spain, but they do a lot of things like with just easy grilled chicken, lightly seasoned things. A lot of pork is in Spain, so you can kind of play around with this. Even some lighter cheeses, so your cheese and your classic Spanish tapas, some very simple ones would be really great with this. Nothing too overly complicated. A lot of things with seafood stuff, so even they do a lot surprisingly with tuna, fresh sardines, things like that. Some stronger flavored seafood items would actually do really well with this because this has enough flavor and weight to it that would stand up to those flavors. Gotta have a second sip. I love how long that finish is. And it's got enough of a mouthfeel. It's almost creamy compared to that about Albarino. So it does have a touch of oak to it. So as soon as a white wine goes in oak, that's where you're getting that vanilla and toasted notes to it, and it gives it more creamy texture. So again, it's just another way that the food and wine pairing thing would work well with something simple like a Chardonnay, but from Spain. So this next wine is probably a surprising color if you are used to the very, very pale pink rosés. You're probably looking at this going, what is this? It's such a dark color for a rosé or rosado, as they call it in Spain. So yes, it's going to be a little bit more intense, probably, than you're used to. So this is made by Gran Fioro. It is a fairly popular winery. Built in 1872 is when it started. It's in the Navarra region of Spain, which is just east of Rioja. So that's the north central part of Spain, if you look on your map. They do make some red wines, a few whites, but they are primarily world renowned for their rosados. And you're going to see why after you have this, because this is probably nothing like the other ones that you've had before, which is why we've always happily carried it every time that we can get it here at the bar. So you know the procedure. We're going to look at the color of it first. You barely have to have anything white nearby because it's so intense of a color, but just in case you wanted a close-up, look at that. It's like a dark coral color almost. Surprisingly, most rosés are not really pink in tone. They're more of this salmon coral color. That's just because of the color of the skins, which I'll explain in a second. But it's definitely more intense in color. So that's giving you an idea of what kind of flavor to expect. So the other thing you're also going to note, you'll see it a little bit more than you're doing a rosé. There's like a colorless rim between where the color meets the edge of the glass or the inside sides of the glass. And that's called the meniscus. And if you remember back in your old chemistry days, the meniscus it's just that colorless rim in between the actual liquid and the surface that it's leaning on. And as you get to darker ones, you get to see it more often, but usually that gives an indication of the age of the wine. So as wines get older, mostly red wines, that meniscus is going to get larger. The color of the wine becomes a little bit more transparent, a little darker in tone, and looks a little more see-through, closer to this. Okay, so now that we've looked at it, we're going to take 2 sniffs, so be prepared, this is a big one. At first you're thinking, okay, I'm getting little hints of strawberry, little hints of floral. So add some oxygen to that. Love the color of this wine. Put your nose back in. A little bit more intense now. I'm getting more fruitiness, definitely. This wine's all about strawberry. So not quite a strawberry flavored wine, so don't go into this thinking that's what it is. Okay, first sip. It's like an underripe strawberry. You know, like it still has the acidity and freshness of it and tartness. but it's definitely got a longer kind of strawberry finish. So that first sip, of course, is just to cleanse your palate, especially if you were just having the wine before this, the Chardonnay. You wanted to have a good starting point. But there's enough acidity that I can still feel it in my mouth, which is a good thing. So second sip, now I can really see it starting to coat the mouth a little bit more. Juicy is what I'm getting out of this. So this is a blend of red grapes. So people who are normally hesitant to go towards wine like this, because even this color, this is very similar in color to the Meniscus, which is famous in Portugal, just south of Spain. And Meniscus is known for being fairly sweet. So a lot of people tend to look at rosé wines in the LCBO and they hesitate and walk by them because they think they're going to be sweet. This is anything but. It is very dry, juicy still, a great balance. And because there's enough acidity and freshness in it, it's a very great food pairing wine. I've been drinking more and more rosés, especially I'm finding as I'm getting older and I'm spending more time with wine and food pairings, because I'm always kind of looking for a wine to pair with certain dishes and my food tastes are quite eclectic. I'm finding rosés tend to be the easy one that goes with everything, so I tend to order it quite a bit. I tend to buy them for myself quite a bit. So this one is definitely juicy. This would be great with a cheese platter because it goes with some semi-soft cheeses, like a fresh cheese like a brie and a goat cheese, all the way to a Gruyere, a Manchego, which would be classics for Spain, Swiss cheeses, so pretty much a full array. You could probably even get away with this a little bit with a mild blue cheese as well, just because there's enough flavor to handle the weight of a blue cheese. But surprisingly, this is one of those great wines that kind of goes with everything. So this is your, especially that 5 o'clock nibbles with cheese and some little tapas meats and olives and things like that. This is a really great wine for that. So this is a blend of Garnacha, so Grenache in France is Garnacha in Spain, Tempranillo, which I'll explain in a second, which is the grape in Spain, and then Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. So you're getting that Merlot Cabernet Sauvignon is a nod to the Bordeaux region, which is the northern, just north of Spain. And it's more and more of those French varietals are growing, just like I mentioned about the Raymat Chardonnay in the northern part of Spain. The French had a really fairly big influence on Spanish winemakers back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when that phylloxera virus was ravaging the vineyards in Europe. And as it was going through France, the French winemakers kept going south to continue and try to get their harvest done prior to the ends of the seasons. And so they ended up, especially down in the southern part, like in the Bordeaux area, spent a lot of time in northern Spain and worked a lot of the local farmers and local winemakers in there. And they were kind of the ones who taught the Spanish how to take the grapes that they had there and blend them to make something different. So to this day, you still get a lot of blends up there. So similar to this. So again, I said it's basically 4 of the great red grapes, especially in that area. Garnacha, which is I find is kind of like dark fruits, Tempranillo, which is kind of like a spicy red fruits. Merlot is your bright ruby red fruits, and then Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, is a it's not quite a smoky, but again, it's a little bit more on the bright red fruits. So you're getting these different things with different levels of tannin, different fruitness levels, and then all they do is they take all of those grapes and in the wine, and they put everything together in one big vat, and then they strain out the skins. As soon as it gets the color they want, they take the skins out. And the skin is where all the color is. All those different red grapes, if you cut them open, they're all clear inside. So it's clear flesh on the inside, and it's just a color on the outside that actually tints the wine. So the longer a wine, the grapes and the skins are allowed to sit and macerate with that wine and the juice, the darker the juice is going to be. So that's one of the reasons that there are so many different colors, shades of rosés and rosados throughout the LCBO and all of the shelves and stores everywhere. And it's because depending what grapes being used, how ripe the fruit is, how long the grapes have stayed in contact, the skin stay in contact with the juice before it's made. There's different ways of making rosé. If you haven't watched previous classes of mine where I explain the different methods of rosé, the maceration method is what they used for this, which is used for most European rosé wines, which basically just means it's skin contact enough to get the color and they strain them out. The other way is called saigner, which basically means bleeding. So they just take out some of the juice during the red wine making process. They kind of pull it out and leave the rest, the skins and everything in there with the remainder of the juice, so that red wine becomes more intense, and then the remaining that they pulled out ends up being a kind of a rosé type color. It's not used as often anymore. There are still some areas in Europe that still do the saigner method. And then the third method is the kind of like the blush method, where they add a splash of red in with the white to make the color they want. It's not really done as often as it used to be. In the 70s, it was very popular, especially in California. A lot of people recognize all the 70s blush wines that were out. But what made it popular originally was in Champagne, the rosé Champagne was originally made with a splash of fully developed Pinot Noir with the skins and all into the champagne mix, as opposed to removing the skins to make the champagne clear, and that made the rosé Champagne. And it was Veuve Clicquot who invented that, so yay for the widow Clicquot. And there are still some champagne houses that still make it that way to this day. So there's your little crash course on rosé. Anyway, so for pairings, of course, I told you any of the cheese platters, medium stuff does. You can handle seafood dishes and chickens and salads and things like that to have a little more weight. Chicken and pork. This is a great warm weather wine. So for those who are looking for barbecue things, like grilled ribs would be spectacular with this. So just think of the flavors of the wine, and then what would be, if you made a sauce out of this, what would it be good with? So think of salads with chicken and vegetables, or grilled vegetables. Think of like kebabs type thing, and think of ribs I mentioned, or roast pork, like a big pork roast, even a barbecue pulled pork, as long as the sauce isn't too rich and too spicy, but it can handle some spiciness with this. So stir fries would be really good with this as well. So just think about all the things. Just think strawberry, because that's the pronounced flavor of this, and then think of all the things that would go well with that, and then you've got a whole selection of stuff. But yes, veggies and salads, and especially in the summer when you have like a cold platter of different things and veggies and freshly poached shrimp, or grilled shrimp and grilled chicken skewers, and avocado and all that kind of, you can have all of those kind of different flavors on that, and this wine will pretty much go with anything. So it might be your new go-to, so we better go buy more before you go get it all. Okay, so you remember when I said we're going to talk about Tempranillo? Tempranillo is the main red grape in Spain. It translates to the term early riser, and that just means that it's one of the first grapes to ripen, so that it gets the longest harvest each season. So because there's so much of it, and it gets such a long growing season, it tends to be made primarily all over the country. It is used in blends, it is used on its own, it's used to make rosados. It is one of those grapes that it is the grape of Spain. So you can be asking for Tempranillo, but if you ask for a red blend from other areas of Spain, pretty much most of the time a Tempranillo will be in there someplace, regardless of the percentage. It's because everybody's got some, right? It's one of those easy growing things. So this wine has a bit of a story. So this is from the Rioja region, which is just west of Navarra. So again, that central part. About 80% of all of the wines exported from Spain come from that one little area on your map. That's how popular the Rioja area is. I always suggest to people who are big wine and travel lovers, and they are looking for, if they were going to go to Spain, I mean, food and wine is phenomenal all over the country. I probably have traveled through about 70 to 75% of Spain. I will be going back, of course, but I know that for especially for the first timers, 10 times people tend to go either on cruises and they stop in, or they go directly over to Barcelona. Barcelona is great, but Barcelona is very touristy. They do have a lot of tapas bars and fun things, but it is not all about wine or wine and food compared to other regions in Spain. Madrid is one of my favorite places to go just because I've been there so often and I'm comfortable there, but it's a very cosmopolitan city, meaning there's people from all over the world besides just Spain that go there, because of course it's the capital, so there's a lot of government and blah, blah, blah. So they tend to have people from all over the world. So that's a great place to go as well if you're worried about language barriers or things like that. But if you really want to go because you want to deep dive into wine and food and the true Spanish culture, I always suggested people going into Rioja region. Specifically, my favorite city to go and visit is Logroño, which is the capital of that area. Just north of there, there's a little town called Haro. So, people always joke around and go, Haro. But it's Haro. It's a little town that's got a bunch of little wineries and classic tasting rooms that you'd be familiar with if you've ever gone down to Niagara and or California, and I'm trying to think of other places, other little wine regions. But if you're familiar with that, going to tasting rooms or out in BC where it's just open, they have tasting room hours and you go in, so it's very classic like that. So that little town probably has quite a few of them and probably names that you're familiar with. But that's maybe 20-25 minutes from Logroño. So there's a little street called Calle Laurel, which runs, it's a fairly long street, carless, that goes in the center of Logroño in the downtown area. And it is just full of tapas bars. It connects to a bunch of areas, but that one's the most famous one. And I have famously managed to get through 9 of them, doing one tapa and one wine through every single one. But it's an never-ending place for you to ping pong back and forth across this alleyway, and people standing around and chatting, and the street and just the atmosphere of it. If you ever want that feeling of being in a classic tapas bar, Calle Laurel is the one. I'm actually going to, I'll see if I can tag either links or photos or whatever below to this, because I'm taping it before I finish the video. So if there's anything below for me to show you what Calle Laurel is like, I'll have it below because it's fun. So let's look at the wine. So this is Campo Viejo, which I'll talk about in a second. It's one of my oldest favorite wines from Spain. Never disappoints. This is your go-to if you like the really well-rounded red wine. So first we're going to look at the color first. Definitely a much deeper red, but not heavy looking. So you know that there's going to be, it's going to be flavorful, but it's not going to be overly intense. And that meniscus is that colorless area is really a little bit bigger, meaning it's a little bit older wine, which it is. And then you can actually see a gradual from that colorless rim going into almost like a very pale color into a darker color. That's what happens when red wine ages. So we're gonna take 2 sniffs. First one, nose in. Red fruit, little spicy, little smoky, which I always love about wines from Rioja. Adding some oxygen into the thing. A little more intense now. So you're getting that dark cherry, plum. I always love it earthy, and it's just got a touch of spice, makes my nose tingle a little bit, which is good. So 2 sips. Now, if you're a red wine drinker, you're thinking, oh, how come I haven't had this before? It is, it's dark flavor, so dark red fruit. Again, it's got a bit of a spiciness to it, but not burning spice. Kind of like that little bit of a peppery bit to it, especially when you inhale. After taking a sip, but take your second sip and then you'll see. It's just like biting into a juicy, like a plum of some sort. So Campo Viejo, of course, is one of the more famous wines from that area. It's actually just outside the downtown of that Logroño city that I mentioned. Probably about 15-20 minute drive from the downtown core. It's that close. Kind of over on a hill, just outside the city, kind of looking over the city. This is the 2015 Reserva. Reserva just means it spent more time in oak before it got shipped to you. So that's actually a good thing for people who like those bigger, full-bodied wines. Looking for words like Reserva or Gran Reserva, that just means it spent way more time in oak. And spending more time in an oak barrel, whether it's a smaller barrel or a larger barrel, and that just gives you the intensity of the oak in a certain period of time. But it basically kind of smooths it out. So it's absorbing some of the acidity of the wine, and it's actually giving back some of those warm flavors that an oak barrel can. whether it's using French oak or American oak or a combination thereof. So that's one of the reasons winemakers tend to use oak, so it tends to smooth things out a little bit, smoother in the mouthfeel, a little less intense, kind of mellows out those tannins. Tannins are the things, the flavors and feeling that you get from having wines that have a lot of contact with the skins and seeds. That's that dryness, puckeriness that you get, and sometimes it even pulls inside your mouth. But that's the tannins. So, and juicy tannins really leaves the acidity levels fairly high, and that what makes it a great food pairing wine. So this can handle things like a steak and fatty cuts of pork and beef and lamb. That's where the tannins come in. And that Tempranillo in the blend is what kind of gives it that little bit of a tingle. So sometimes, especially if it's a younger wine with the Tempranillo, it gives you a bit of a tingle on your tongue. And that makes it really great and brings out spiciness in things like barbecue sauces, or if you had a spice crust on the outside of a roast, or on outside of potatoes even. Paprika is very popular in Spain and Spanish cooking. Pimentón is a smoked paprika. So anything that's sprinkled with a little bit of that is a perfect match for a wine like this. Because it's almost like having dark dried fruits in with on your cheese and meat tray, right? So you're getting those fatty things or whatever, but then you get these like dates and dried prunes or other dried fruit that on the platter, and you're kind of nibbling on that in between. That's the same concept when it comes to pairing this kind of wine with the cheese and the meats. So this is the first wine that my husband and I fell in love with. Not this particular vintage because we've been married a long time, but we found this on a cruise many years ago and fell in love with it and have been a fan of Campo Viejo ever since. Campo Viejo just basically means like, old camp. It's been around for a long time, and you can find it at almost every LCBO. There might be other ones besides this. You can even get a Tempranillo, 100% Tempranillo from Campo Viejo. Most LCBOs carry it, as well as you'll get the Rosado version with the Tempranillo that will kick around sometime in the spring. They do make a white blend as well. So just taking a look, the name says it all. You don't have to go to the vintages section, even for one as old as the 2015. This is just found in your general listing. So just look for where the Spanish wine are in the middle of the store, and you'll find it in no time. So for this last wine, I wanted to show you what a good aged Spanish wine can do at really great value. So this last one is from Anciano Winery. Anciano is pretty famous throughout Spain for making really great wines for, again, centuries. They produce wines and grow grapes in different areas of Spain to create the blends that they want. They also have a line of wines in Portugal. They make rosados, they make garnachas, they make a bunch of different things, but they've been doing it for so long that they're pretty well renowned that if you get something from Anciano, you know that it's going to be a really great wine. So I'm gonna finish my glass from the Campo Viejo before we start pouring this one. So this is a Gran Reserva Tempranillo. So if you remember, I said the Reserva spends a little bit more time in oak than a wine that wouldn't. So there is a Campo Viejo Rioja that's out there that will just say Rioja and won't say anything else on it. That just basically means that it spent maybe a little time in oak, went into the bottle. There's rules based on whether it can be called a Rioja, Reserva, Gran Reserva. So this is a Gran Reserva Tempranillo. So this one is 7 years old before they decided to put it in bottles. Regardless of how long, though this is 7 years, it doesn't necessarily mean it's been 7 years in oak. So this basically spent about 18 months in oak. Again, it's 100% Tempranillo, but it spent a lot of time in oak before it was sort of set around in stainless steel tanks, before it was put in bottles, before it got basically sat in their cellars before they decided to ship it out and send it out here to you, to my bar, to put in your little bottles, to put in your little kit. Anciano wins awards all the time. You'll see that there's award stickers on the side of this bottle. If I go through my list of all the awards this one has won, it won a gold medal for the 2009 vintage. It won a silver medal from another one in Canada for 2009 vintage. For their 2008 vintage, it won a bronze medal for the International Wine Challenge Decanter Wine Awards. It won another one in International Wine in 2015 for their 2007. And then they also won another one in Canada for their 2006 vintage, which was a gold medal one. So they are basically making spectacular wines for a great price. If you look at your tasting notes, you'll know that this wine is $13.95. So yes, it's spectacular wine for the price. All right, so enough talking. Let's actually drink it. So first thing to do, of course, is look at the color. So the color's similar to the Campo Viejo. I find it's a little darker in tone for the red. And you're getting a little of that tawny color, which is that brownish red color along the rim. So it's just giving you an indication, of course, of the age again. So this is a 2010. So this was actually set aside for 7 years before they even started bottling and sending it here. So now, in the nose. So you're getting a little bit darker on the fruit, and it's a little bit more of like smokiness, like tobacco. And I get darker, almost like a dark leather sofa. So this is that sitting on a leather sofa having a glass of red wine thing. Definitely dark cherries. All right, 2 sips. First one. Definitely dark cherry. But it's all of that dark, smoky spiciness. That's that spiciness that I told you about that comes out in Tempranillo. As it sits on this first sip, you're already starting to get the little tiny tingle on your tongue. Even though this is an older wine, you're still getting it. So it means it's going to be a great match for things that have a little bit of spice in it. All right, so second sip. It's got so much flavor, even though it looks like it's going to be fairly light in weight and mouthfeel. There's so much flavor in this, it packs a punch. This is one of the reasons that's one of our big sellers when we do have it in here. And it's, again, for the price point, you can get a really big glass or buy a bottle, sit and enjoy it with some friends. It's just an all around, and it's one of those red wines that everybody enjoys because it's dry and it's complex. It's got a bit of spice and flavor to it, whether you're eating or you're not eating. There's enough going on that it's one of those good all-around red wines, which is one of the reasons that I love Spanish wines. They are meant and designed to enjoy with friends or family. This is your Sunday dinner or Thursday dinner these days. Is basically whenever you want to have a sit down and you make a roast or a rack a lamb if you're feeling fancy. And you just want one of those really good, easy drinking, not too pricey red wine, and just to sort of relax and not stress out about if you're trying to impress anybody, and just sort of enjoy yourself. And that's the whole idea of Spanish dining. It's not so much about as much as they love great food and they love great wine, it's more about the company that you're enjoying it with. So it's one of the things about the Spanish culture that we've always kind of enjoyed and fell in love with. And that's why there's a lot of little nods to Spain in this bar. We've got posters from Seville when they're there for Spanish bullfight for the April Fair. I've got 2 posters of that. We do have things like we actually name our boards with tapas raciones, similar to what they do in Spain. Some of those wine bars and tapas bars throughout that Calle Laurel and Logroño, a lot of them just relied on chalkboards, which I always liked because it allowed that flexibility. Again, so there's little tiny nods to Spain in this place, and it's because of its love and passion for food and wine that really made me fall in love with the country, and that's one of the reasons we go back again and again. And it just encapsulates the entire concept of culinary travel for me. That's what it does. Anyways, I'm hoping that if you weren't a fairly new to the wines of Spain, I'm really hoping that this gave you a good kind of overview of the different styles that are out there, whether you're a white wine drinker, whether you're a red wine drinker. If you're not familiar with rosés because you thought they were going to be too light and frou-frou, that this one kind of packed enough of a punch that kind of woke you up to, oh, there's more to rosés than just the little pretty ones with the girly flowers on it. Maybe you are a big Chardonnay drinker and you thought, okay, well, I like a Chardonnay, and now you know that Spanish also make them. You may like a blend, you may like a single varietal. There's basically something for everybody. And for the price point and the value of it, which is one of the reasons this kit wasn't as costly as some of our other ones, you can get spectacular wines. It's good bang for the buck. So I'm always trying to encourage people to sort of get out of their usual rut of, it's not that I'm against them, but everyone goes towards California, or Italy, especially up here in the Sudbury area. And there's nothing wrong with the wines from there, but there are so many other countries and places to visit that also have nods to a lot of those places. And winemakers around the world actually travel to all of these other countries and wine regions to learn from each other, and then take those practices and bring them home, and then use what they've learned to maybe make a new style of wine on their own country. So you'll be surprised that there's a lot of overlap throughout all wine regions. So just because you like one doesn't mean you're not going to like the other. So it's all about experimenting, and that's what we like to encourage here. So grab a glass. I hope you enjoyed yourself. We will have more tasting kits as we go along. We realize now that this is actually a fun thing to do. People are enjoying it sitting at home, and it's our little way of sending a little toast to you. So raise your glass. We always have to finish with a salute saying stay home, stay safe, and have some wine. Cheers. Or shall I say salud?